Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Sunday, September 5th, 2021, and today we're going to be talking about President Donald Trump now bringing in this idea of election fraud in an election that has not even occurred already. Donald Trump speaking on this conservative talk show talking about how the 2021 Virginia governor's race is a very close election, saying, quote, "You know how they cheat in elections," referring to Democrats. The Virginia governor's election, you better watch it. You have a close race in Virginia, but it's not close if they cheat. He's already starting to build up this idea that the Virginia governor election in 2021 will be a race that is going to be stolen. He's building up this rhetoric because he knows he's going to utilize it later on, and it's the same exact thing that we've seen from President Trump in the past. Now, looking at the history in the state of Virginia, we know that in 2017, the Virginia governor's race went to the Democratic Party. Now, at this point in time, Donald Trump did not say that this election was rigged. The Democratic Party won the Virginia governor's race by 9 percentage points after Hillary Clinton only won the state by just around 5 points. Donald Trump, in fact, speaking out in this race, saying that the race was hard fought, saying Ed Gillespie worked hard but did not embrace me or what I stand for. Not saying the election was rigged, but still trying to pivot the blame onto Ed Gillespie more than his negative approval rating at the time. Keep in mind, around November, December 2017 was amongst the lowest points of Donald Trump's presidency, rivaled only by the final day of President Trump in office, January 20th, 2021, when his approval rating was at the lowest point ever and the disapproval rating at the highest point ever. But point being, in this Virginia race, Donald Trump did not say that the election was rigged. In fact, in 2018 and 2019, Donald Trump did not use this rhetoric either. When it came down to the Senate races in 2018 or the Democrats flipping both chambers in 2019 in the state of Virginia, Donald Trump did not refer to elections being fraudulent, that elections were being stolen by the Democratic Party. He knew that wouldn't be rhetoric that he could utilize ahead of 2020 because it would push people away from voting for him. Well, after the 2020 election, he got a lot more comfortable with it, and now it is starting to pour into what we know about our election. So just looking at Virginia in 2021, how does it stand relative to 2017? Well, 2017, Ralph Northam won by 8.9%, but was expected to win by 3.3%. Obviously, a very big uptick for Democrats there. As it stands now, the race actually isn't even as close. In fact, is expected to go to Terry McAuliffe by 5.2%, and if you adjust it, potentially could go to the Democrats by around 10, 11 points if the difference there is the exact same. Now, obviously, it's not going to be. These polls might be overestimating Terry McAuliffe's support. They might be underestimating Terry McAuliffe's support. But the point being that looking at the stats, looking at the data, Donald Trump would have had more of a reason in 2017 to expect the Virginia race to be, in a sense, obviously not at all, but would have had more of a reason to based off of this 6-point difference, or this 5-point difference here, or 6-point if you're rounding up, difference here between the spread of the final polls and the final results versus 2021, which is already expected to outperform 2017 by polling data, and then eventually in the general election, we will see how that compares. But, looking at what Ed Gillespie did in 2017 was also a very similar thing to what Glenn Youngkin is doing to Donald Trump right now. He's shunning him. He's having people speak on his behalf, or did in 2017, besides President Trump. Now, President Trump, of course, endorsed Ed Gillespie, but, he did not campaign with him actively. And that was something that many members of the right wing actually slammed Ed Gillespie on, saying that that was a gross miscalculation of what's going to happen in Virginia, that they could have capitalized off President Trump's energy from the 2016 presidential election. Obviously, they were wrong. President Trump ultimately led Ralph Northam to victory and Ed Gillespie to defeat, because Ed Gillespie actually came close in 2014 when it came down to a Senate race, lost by 17,000 votes in 2014, nearly became a senator that would have been serving through 2020. But he conceded that election in 2014 as the Senate nominee, and then in 2017, a closer race, he also conceded the race. Ed Gillespie had no problem conceding the presidential race. We do not know, however, whether or not Glenn Youngkin will concede the race. You see, at this point in time, President Trump is starting to build up this idea that the Virginia governor election is going to be stolen by the Democratic Party, just as he did for the 2020 presidential election. Now, Virginia wasn't one of those states where President Trump decided to go out and say that the Democratic Party stole Virginia. He did make the argument in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Georgia, Arizona, but Virginia was a state that was so far outside that would have been laughable to even try to make such an argument. Joe Biden had the largest margin of victory for a Democrat in Virginia since 1944. He won by double digits across the state state that voted for George W. Bush 2 times, was one of the closest races in the 2012 presidential election. I mean, Hillary Clinton, with her vice presidential nominee being Tim Kaine, who later went on in 2018 to win by over 15 points in that Senate election, only won Virginia by around 5 points. So for Joe Biden to have won it by over 10 points was certainly a monumental thing, and it showed a clear, consistent indicator that Virginia was getting bluer and bluer and bluer. And instead of retaliating against that, instead of trying to analyze what went wrong following the 2016 presidential election and 2017 governor election and 2018 midterms and 2019 Virginia House of Delegate elections, Virginia state Senate elections, instead of analyzing what went wrong from 2016 through 2020, President Trump instead tries to build this idea that the election is rigged already, saying that Democrats cheat, saying you have a close race in Virginia. Well, 5 points arguably is a close race, but it's not as close as it was in 2017, and I don't understand why nobody has informed President Trump of that point. It says that the Virginia governor's race, you better watch it. You have a close race, but it's not close if they cheat. Now, looking at it, Amanda Chase, someone who has endorsed Glenn Youngkin, who said originally she was going to run as an independent, did not end up running as an independent, saying that she was going to be representing Glenn Youngkin and that Democrats like to cheat. You have to cast your vote before they do. Essentially just referring to the fact or the baseless claims of the 2020 presidential election, saying that the election was rigged. A Youngkin spokesman did not respond to messages seeking to confirm that the campaign had enlisted her as a surrogate. So they are hiding from this point. Glenn Youngkin's campaign did not immediately respond to a request for comment on Trump's claim. They are not shooting down this rhetoric because they know they need it in order to win over these Trump-type voters. But it's rhetoric that is dangerous. It is rhetoric that is going to jeopardize the American political system. When you look at the 2021 race here, people on the Democratic side are obviously not going to be happy if people say that the election was rigged. We know so far over the past history of 4 years that Virginia is a blue state. Virginia does lean towards the left. All of these people that ran for the governor race on the Democratic side have all started to support Terry McAuliffe, and Terry McAuliffe easily won that primary. And you see, this isn't the first instance of the Republican Party trying to say that the Democratic Party should not be on this ballot. In fact, there's currently, the Republican Party is suing the Terry McAuliffe campaign in an effort to remove him from the ballot. Now, question being, because after or right before the primary actually occurred, Terry McAuliffe did not sign this type of candidacy form, which technically means that he was not a candidate, but obviously if he made it through the primary, if he's recognized by the Democratic Party as their nominee and recognized by every state citizen, then obviously he is on that ballot. He served as governor before, and they are trying to take advantage of one type of minor mistake within the ballot in order to utilize that and expand that onto removing him from the ballot entirely. But you see here that pretty much looking at the way that this race is going, all of the Democrats have endorsed Terry McAuliffe. Joe Biden came to speak to him for the first time in a single public event for President Biden. You have the endorsement of Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, Ralph Northam, all of these people. The ratings are lean Democrat at the lowest and likely Democrat at the highest. I mean, everybody expects this race to go towards Terry McAuliffe, and the overall average shows that McAuliffe takes a 5.2% lead. And if you take a look at a lot of these numbers here, it's quite fascinating to see just how much every single poll puts Terry McAuliffe ahead. It doesn't matter which type of pollster it is, whether it's Monmouth University putting him ahead by 7 points, whether it's Christopher Newport University putting him ahead by 9 points, whether it's Change Research putting him ahead by 6 points. You take out, actually, the Democrat and Republican pollsters here, and you still see that Terry McAuliffe has a lead. In not one poll has Glenn Youngkin defeated Terry McAuliffe in this poll, in these polls. In 2017, that was simply not the case. You can actually see here that during a brief period of time, there were times where Ed Gillespie was sometimes up 8 points, sometimes up 2 points. And obviously, some of these pollsters were just heavily wrong, just completely missed the mark. But point is that sometimes Ed Gillespie was expected to win the governor's race. That is not at all the case today. Not a single pollster, and you can see here many of them have the R by the name. And what that means essentially is that Republicans essentially funded this poll. They are trying to get numbers for their own internal campaigns, and they still cannot find enough voters to say that they prefer Glenn Youngkin over Terry McAuliffe. I think that this is just a consistent proof that there is a consistency here for Terry McAuliffe, that he is the favorite amongst everywhere you ask, no matter Republican, Democrat, independent pollster, whatever it might be, Terry McAuliffe takes the lead. And instead of combating that, President Trump pushes this rhetoric that will only continue to harm Glenn Youngkin's chances at winning this race. Because Glenn Youngkin arguably had an okay chance at winning this race in the beginning. But then Donald Trump endorsed him not once, not twice, but 3 times starting in May of 2021. He campaigned with Mike Pence. He wholeheartedly accepted the endorsement of President Trump on national television. A lot of what Glenn Youngkin has done so far has put himself in a difficult position in a race that he otherwise might have been able to win. Whether it was the hot mic incident with the abortion comments, whether it was the ignoring of the debate at the Virginia Bar Association, Glenn Youngkin is trying to make a name for himself and try to win over voters by taking older types of Republican tactics. And as much as he has tried to shun President Trump the same way Ed Gillespie did, he's still being closely associated with him the same way Ed Gillespie was. In fact, Ralph Northam used this as energy in order to say that instead of standing against him, Ed Gillespie stands alongside President Trump. And one ad saying exactly that. Ed Gillespie won't stand up to Donald Trump because Ed is standing right next to him in a TV ad in the final week of the campaign season. So it's very clear what the Democratic Party is trying to do to Glenn Youngkin and closely associate him with President Trump. But President Trump in 2017 did not say the election was rigged. President Trump, in many instances, acknowledged the election results in Virginia as legitimate. But because he wants to continue this idea that the 2020 presidential election was rigged, he is going to say it was rigged on every single level in order to try to revitalize this base that truly believes the election was rigged. I mean, honestly speaking, I can't comprehend it. You can take a look at the election results yourself. You will not find a single instance in which the Democratic Party tried to change the outcome of the election results through cheating. The Democratic Party, Republican parties always campaign through normal methods of campaign styling. In fact, there is that argument there that obviously, the Democratic Party did not cheat in the 2020 election, but now that the laws are starting to change dramatically, there is that argument that the opposition party, in this case being the GOP, is trying to make it so they have easier voting laws for their own voters, make it harder, in a sense, for pro-Democratic voters. And I understand that, it does all come down to interpretation, comes down to the idea of election security, but what election security is there even to be expanded upon? I mean, looking at the 2020 presidential election, this race was not a rigged election. Virginia, in specific, was certainly not a rigged election, a state that went to Joe Biden by 10.1%. Every single margin across the entire United States was decided by a fair and free election. Joe Biden fairly won the election, and to suggest otherwise is to completely go against our way of American democracy. And it's fascinating that Glenn Youngkin will not even push down such a claim, just in an effort to continue to have that Trump support. Because all Glenn Youngkin would need to do is say, personally, I do not believe the election will be rigged. I think this will be a fair election, and I will concede if I lose. This is not Donald Trump's election. He is not speaking for anybody else. But instead of pushing back on it, in a sense, he's embracing it by allowing this to cultivate and allowing the media and reporters, including YouTube channels like myself, to report on this will only hinder him in a state that clearly pushed Donald Trump down and away from the White House, from 20 minutes away out of Northern Virginia. There was a clear reason why Donald Trump was rejected in Virginia. And to try to ignore this rhetoric and try to not argue it, but not push away from it, goes to show exactly how much you are complacent with, how much you are okay with President Trump saying. And if President Trump can make this argument that the election is rigged, it's going to put the GOP in a very difficult position because it's already starting. Either Glenn Youngkin says, yes, I believe the election is rigged if I do not win, or he says nothing, or he comes out against it. But the only way I really see him winning back some of these independent voters, some of these more left-leaning voters, is by saying, no, the election was not rigged. But clearly that is not something that Glenn Youngkin seems to be inclined to do. But the election is just 2 months away. There is not a lot of time for Glenn Youngkin to try to recover this race. Looking at the polling numbers, it simply seems to be a little too late. The race started out in July with McAuliffe ahead by 2 points. You can actually see some earlier polling data before that showed that the race was in a very close position. In June, Terry McAuliffe only had 2-point leads, 4-point leads, sometimes 5-point leads, then back down to a 2-point lead. Whatever it was closer than being up consistently +5, +6. I mean, just looking at the numbers now, Terry McAuliffe is starting to do better than he did before. And it's fascinating considering that Joe Biden's approval rating is beginning to deteriorate relative to where it was before. So all in all, what do we see here? President Trump is trying to infiltrate the 2020 election in Virginia and say it was rigged. Regardless of what type of impact that has on his base, it is a clear and direct attack on our trust in American democracy and needs to be pushed down by Glenn Youngkin if he wants to have a chance at winning back some of these independent, more liberal voters that previously used to vote for Republicans. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2021 election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today. Sorry, tomorrow.